got it. Great.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. So yes, I'm going to be talking about this general theme of putting users in control of social platforms, and then fleshing it out with some presentations from Farnaz and Thea. People are always sleepy after lunch, so if you sort of nod off, I want to make sure you get the conclusion of the talk. There's a ton of research going on how platforms should moderate. And I think that's asking the wrong question, because I think that platforms should not moderate. Rather, I think platforms should empower users to choose what they see. And the platform should simply act as a user's agent to provide what they want. And I'm going to show over the course of the next few talks that this is technically feasible. We'll give some examples of systems that do this, and I think do it well. And I think that this is also beneficial. But I think a lot more research is needed in order to prove that or demonstrate it. But essentially, I'm trying to argue for directing more research in this direction, as opposed to thinking entirely about how we should enforce content moderation policies on the platforms. And for this audience, I'm curious about what legal levers we can use to move us in this direction of more user autonomy. Just to put a bit of a log loss on this, again, I feel like we have a lot of conversations about how the platforms are preventing people from seeing certain things. But I think we're having problems where the platforms are forcing people to see certain things. And I would like to eliminate that power from the platforms and let people see only what they actually want to see on the platforms. So in terms of my research, as Joan mentioned, I started as an algorithmicist. As I moved into HCI, I started thinking about information management generally. And a sort of general theme was that we've got these computers that can really amplify the skills of humans. People have ideas and insights about how to manage information, and computers ought to empower them. Do the busy work for them, so that users can be creative about how they manage information. And instead, computers often get in the way and won't let people do what they want. And they sort of make people dumber by preventing people from managing information the way that they would like. And I've done a lot of work on trying to fix that. And for the first decade, this was really about data management tools. And we had a whole line of projects around letting people who are not programmers create their own information management tools. This has now become what is known as low-code, no-code programming. I started moving into online discussion. The first project we did was one called a project called NB, which is a social annotation platform. So this is, again, about empowering people to organize things the way that they want. If you are in a class and have a textbook and you want to ask questions about the textbook, it's frustrating if you have to go to a separate discussion forum to ask your questions. Instead, why can't you just ask the questions on the textbook? And so we built this tool called NB in 2009. It's been used by about 60,000 students to ask questions in their classes and discuss things with other students. And so it's just this little extra bit of structure where is each post associated in the underlying document that makes the content easier to navigate. It's there when you need it. Your attention is drawn to the right things. But more recently, I've really started to focus on social platforms because we broke the internet and we need to fix it. And sort of the common theme of the tools that we've been building lately is this one around user autonomy. That what's wrong is not something that the platforms should fix, but that the platforms are getting in the way of people fixing what's wrong. Again, the way we try and fix this is by designing tools that have richer representations of the online discussions that convey what people want to express, and design interfaces that use these representations to empower the individual to choose how they want to organize the discussion. And so we're going to work through 4 examples here. I'm going to start by talking about some work that Amy Zhang did when she was a student of mine on dealing with online harassment. Then Farnaz Jambaksh, who's going to be presenting remotely, is going to talk about how to use this to deal with misinformation. Then Thea Henderson, who's here, will talk about how to solve any social network problem by letting anybody build whatever social network they want without doing any programming. And then I'll come back and get to the really half-baked part of the talk and just toss out some further ideas and questions that I hope will provoke some discussion here. The way my group works is that we're a system building group. What we like to do is build systems and study them, but we know that in order to build the system, you have to understand what people need. So we start with need-finding studies, and then we build systems, and we deploy them for user studies, learn what works and what doesn't, and we try to iterate that process. So moving right into the first piece. Squadbox is a tool that we, sorry, when did we start? What timeline are we using? Did we start late? Should I sort of assume
we started at, I think, like 21 minutes after, 22 minutes
Okay, so five minutes late. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start by talking about Squadbox, which is a tool to combat email harassment under the control of the users of the platform. Amy mentioned this briefly yesterday, but I'm going to dive into more detail to support the theme that I'm trying to argue. Online harassment is widespread. Individual messages can hurt, and there's this whole denial of service thing happening when people get hit with too many of these harassing messages to do their jobs. We started by interviewing about 20 harassment victims from various walks of life in order to understand what they were facing in harassment and how they coped with it. And one of the things that came out pretty clearly was that the platform solutions don't work. Automated protections don't work because harassers are too motivated to get around them. If you try and block a user, they'll just make a new account. If you try and block the content that they're sharing, they'll change the spelling. We heard about that earlier today in Casey's talk, I believe. Just asking the platforms to do something about it is a slow, laborious process that often doesn't work. And often the platform won't do anything about it because the harassment doesn't violate the terms of the platform. And this is particularly difficult because sometimes harassment isn't even detectable by anybody except the harasser and the target, right? The harassment may rely on revealing private information about the target that nobody else knows. Or it may involve, it may be based on meanings of words that are only understood by the harasser and the target. And they look completely innocuous to anybody else. There's also the problem that in some cases you actually can't block harassment. It has to be read. There are the obvious cases where you need to look at it in order to decide whether to send it to law enforcement because your life is in danger. But we also encountered sort of crazy situations where the person who was harassing someone was their ex and they shared custody of a child. And so sometimes their ex would send them important information about the child, and sometimes their ex would send them harassing messages. So you can't block the ex. And somebody has to figure out which is it. So really, we also found that no one size fits all. Everybody wants to deal with their harassment differently, and also has a different idea of what harassment is. So what do people do? Well, as Amy said yesterday, people turn to their friends. Right? If somebody sees an email come in and they're not sure if it's harassment, they'll ask a friend to take a look at it and decide if it's harassment. Sometimes if they're really subject to a lot of harassment, they'll just give their friends the passwords to their social media accounts and ask their friends to go in every morning and clear up any harassment that accumulated overnight so that then the user can go in and have that harassing content gone. So we asked, how can we add system support for this? Okay. Now, you might ask, do people really want friends moderating their email? Well, we've seen that people did it, but as we carried out more interviews, we found people saying that, yes, because I have been subject to harassment and I understand what I need, I really do want my friends going through my private messages to deal with that harassment, and I don't really have many privacy concerns anymore. Why friends specifically? Why not strangers? Well, you get support from your friends. You get support from them knowing that you're being harassed, and that the harassment itself can contain personal information that you don't want to share with strangers, but that your friends already know. So friends are the right people to deal with this harassment. You might wonder why friends would want to do this. Well, the answer is friends want to help, right? They see their friend is suffering. They know that they can do something about it. They would leap at that opportunity. Now you might ask if the friends are going to be harmed by having to wade through all of this harassment. And if you think about it, there's a remove that protects them, right? If you see harassment directed at somebody else, it may bother you, but it's not targeting you. Okay, and so it's not about your identity. It's not poking at your weaknesses, and so you're better equipped to handle it than the target of the harassment. Okay. So we built Squadbox to try to support these friends in protecting the targets of harassment, and we decided to focus on mitigating email harassment. And this was a practical choice because email is a nice open API that's easy to connect to. You just use the SMTP protocol, you can pull down messages, you can send messages, and so forth. The way it works is that you set up your email client to redirect incoming email to Squadbox. Just about every client on the planet has forwarding rules that you can use to do this. Squadbox, and you can also, in your filters, put a whitelist that lets your friends skip this whole process and go directly to your inbox. Squadbox receives that forwarded mail and holds it in a moderation queue, notifies friends that there's something that needs checking. And after friends check the email, they act on it. They decide whether to flag it or delete it or possibly release it to go back to you. If it's released, Squadbox sends it back to your inbox with appropriate flags so that it doesn't get looped back to Squadbox again. Now, because of what we learned from our interviews, we wanted to make Squadbox extremely flexible. Okay? Everybody has a different notion of what harassment is, so when you set up your Squadbox account, you describe what harassment is. Your friends can read your instructions and decide based on your instructions whether something is harassing or not. You also get to choose what happens to messages that have been identified as harassing messages. Okay? You can send them on with a tag that says they're harassing. You can delete them. You can store them on Squadbox. There are various actions you can take. Besides rejection, you can actually tag them in various ways. So some harassment targets wanted to know what kind of harassment is it. Is it just profane? Are there actual threats? And so forth. So one interview told us that they wanted to know about a threat of doxing or a death threat as soon as possible, but that they don't need to see insults at all. Okay? And so depending on the type of harassing content, you want different actions. And in fact, many of the interviewees told us that they do want to read their harassment. They just want to have control over how and when they read it. Right? One of the big problems with harassment is this denial of service nature, that you're trying to get your work done and your inbox is full of harassing messages. Okay? Now again, you may want to look for that important email from your ex about your child, but you don't want to do it during working hours. So the idea is to set it aside, but let you look at it later with appropriate tags to tell you which ones you actually need to look at. We also actually allow the Squadbox users to manage whitelists and blacklists for you. That you may have close friends who don't need to be moderated by your squad, and other people who you never want to see, and you can empower the squad to add and remove people in the block list and the whitelist based on the email that they see. So we wanted to run a user study, and we ran into a problem because human subjects protocols are pretty strict about harm to humans, and that makes it kind of tricky to study humans who are being subjected to harassment, because if we built the wrong tool, we could harm them. So we did the best we could. We recruited participants and their friends to use Squadbox to just block spam, which is not harmful the way that harassment is. And we found that the system was usable and effective. And users were quite comfortable with the privacy issues that could have surfaced in this email. They used whitelists to let their close friends through, so that mail from their close friends was not being screened by their squad. It was just mail from other places that was being seen by the squad. And so I think that really resolved most of the privacy concerns. We also demonstrated this to interviewees who were real harassment victims, and they were very favorable about the tool. A very high-profile activist who actually pays a staff of moderators was all gung-ho to try this out as soon as we got it into beta form. So, summary of all this: harassment's really different for everybody, and the differences are both in what they consider to be harassment and also how they want to handle it. And this diversity means that automated tools just aren't enough. On the other hand, friends can and want to help, and systems to support these friend sourcing strategies can make them much more effective, right? If you are going to log into your friend's account and delete all of the harassing email, well, that's great, but what if they don't get to their email until 4 hours later and there's had all this time for more spam to come in, right? Our system instead will queue things up to ensure that they never have to encounter any of that harassment. Okay. And we need to put in lots of flexible options because of the different ways people wanted to deal with their spam. So we had a tool. Our potential users really loved it. We were all set to go. Tomorrow we'll release this to the world. Then Caitlin, the main builder, graduated. And the project sort of sat there for a while. Since then, a startup called Block Party has emerged, at least partly inspired by Squadbox, which is applying the same idea of help your friends block harassment on Twitter. Now, that's great. We were tackling email. Block Party was tackling Twitter, but Block Party was not tackling email. There are so many more platforms. And harassers, not harassers, the targets of harassment reported how harassment is really multi-channel. They hit you on every single communication platform, right? Now, the idea of Squadbox makes sense for any messaging or discussion platform, but integrating each one takes a ton of work, and in fact is often impossible due to the lack of suitable APIs. I'm not actually sure how Block Party pulled off what they're doing. It doesn't seem to be possible with the public APIs that we have found on Twitter. I had a student looking at potentially porting Squadbox to Twitter, and the API is just too limited. So what's the answer? So now I'll engage in a little bit of wishful thinking, right? Data portability, which we heard talked about yesterday a little bit, is just too weak. Like, yes, data portability might let me download my messages from Twitter. And then I could feed my downloaded messages to some kind of moderation platform. But now they're not on Twitter anymore, so I can't read them on Twitter. I can't reply to them on Twitter, right? I need a different kind of portability that lets me work with the data in its place without actually leaving Twitter. For Squadbox, we really just need a little bit of API access, right? We need the ability to redirect an incoming message to our moderation service, and we need a way to deliver a moderated message back to the platform, and that's it. Okay. Now, I don't know if yesterday Laura spoke about these new requirements in the DSA for the interoperability of message platforms, and I don't know if we could sort of twist that to say, Squadbox is a messaging platform. You have to be able to move messages from Twitter into Squadbox because of the DSA. That would be really wonderful. Or is there some application of the sort of canned spam laws that sort of prevent people from, that sort of require telecommunication providers to help people deal with spam on their phones? I don't know. So that was a quick run through the Squadbox story. The plan now is to take a little Q&A about that, and then move on to a next presentation from Farnaz.
Do we have any questions from the in-person audience? Yes.
So I think this is a really interesting idea, and I heard what you were saying about privacy and the participants not minding about privacy, but since this is in the vein of law and thinking about what's happening with this data, especially with respect to harassment, how does your tool or your server kind of sitting in the middle of this, being able to read, obviously your friends can read your emails, which is the point of the system, but the server that's hosting these messages where the friends are going to fetch those and reading them is also hosting the content. So what kind of ethical, responsibility or concern or, practice does the server have to have in order to make sure that these the victims of harassment are being that their data is being protected or that they're not coming to any harm because of it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, this is one of the issues that sort of we were thinking about when we talked about getting to beta so that our activists and so forth could try this, right? So. I think the Squadbox server really should be and is subjected to the same moral requirements and should be subjected to the same legal requirements as your email server, right? I mean, it is holding your email for you, right? And so, people who are using it properly will not be able to access your email, right? Hackers may very well be able to break in and get access to your email, and it's unlikely that we, a small random academic university, can provide the level of security that your Gmail has, right? If you have, again, hackers are destructive by nature. I would imagine if any of them are technically savvy, they might very much want to attack the Squadbox platform. Now, we don't actually make Squadbox visible to the harasser, right? This is all behind the scenes being dealt with, being used by the target of the harassment. And so we have a little bit of security from obscurity, but yeah, I think anytime you're dealing with harassment, you have to think about security. I don't think we have any special insights about how to think about security. If we really wanted to deploy this, we would want to bring in some really professional, some real security professionals to make sure that we were following best practices.
Yeah, just a follow-up, thanks. I'm kind of ignorant about the email fetching process and what it would look like to be a middleman in this situation. I guess so when you're emailing someone else and Gmail is the middleman, you're encrypting your email to Gmail, and then Gmail is then re-encrypting with the recipient's key, so it's like protected in transit. So what would the encryption for this system look like? Well,
you should really think of this system as just simulating another email user, right? This system receives email and sends email. Okay. And so it benefits from the same protections and suffers from the same weaknesses as any two people sending email to each other.
Gotcha.
Right?
Thank you so much.
The email is delivered to this system using the same protocol as the email is used as is used to deliver email to anybody else in the world.
Gotcha.
Hi. I was just wondering, what does the interface look like? Do you need a specialized interface, or does this work with like any email client?
No, so the interface is somewhat specialized, right? I showed you these sort of setting screens for specifying what harassment is and specifying what you want done with it. That's the administrator interface, the interface that's used by the target of the harassment. There's also the interface that is used by the friend who is doing the moderation, and it looks like a moderation interface. You basically have a list of messages that are in the moderation queue. You can click on one, it will show you the message. It gives you some buttons for providing for executing the actions that the administrator has specified. A button for deleting the message, a button for forwarding the message, some checkboxes for adding flags that go in when the message is delivered to the recipient. And so on. So it's basically like an email moderation interface that you would see in any mailing list tool, for example.
And so how do you like tell your email server to send the messages to Squadbox before it sends to you?
That uses something which is standard in most mailing clients now, which are called filtering rules. So you can, for example, when you go on vacation, configure your mail client to send a bounce message back to people saying, I'm on vacation and I won't be able to answer you for a week. And that's done by a rule that you put into your mail client. Another standard rule in most mail clients is a forwarding rule, which says that when email arrives that satisfies the following conditions, forward it to another mailing address. Okay? And so we actually create for you a rule of that nature that you can install in your email client, right? Which says that if you get an email from anybody that's not Squadbox, forward that email to Squadbox. And Squadbox has an email address for receiving that email. Then when Squadbox sends it back to you, that's from Squadbox, and so that doesn't get caught up by the rule. And so then it goes into your inbox or whatever. So it's just using the standard email protocol everywhere. And that was what was nice about email, is that there's this nice open API, you follow the rules, it works with everybody. Where'd the mic go?
Hi. I know that your platform's about, like not worrying about scale, like worrying more about context, like using local networks. But I'm curious, like when you did your interviews, did you kind of talk to people about comparing, I guess, this kind of system where they're using their local network and they're like really relying on their local network to do this for them, as compared to a system where you anonymize maybe the emails and then there is some labeling that the user does initially, which says these messages, like this is the context, but everything is anonymous. So the people who are looking at it have no idea. And did you talk to them about how they would feel like with these two systems? And
Right. Well, so you're suggesting an interesting middle ground where you use labeling to train people who don't know you very well, but you don't use machine learning. You still have people do it, right? So, going all the way, you would just use the Google Perspective API, which detects toxicity, right? And that would be an automated way to try and detect the harassment. But as we've discussed, harassment is so unique to each individual. We heard Tesh yesterday talk about the progress they're making on email harassment, but I think there's still a long way to go to make those things accurate enough to work as well as we want. And I think strangers, there's going to be the same kinds of problems. Like they won't know the particular triggers for this harassment victim. If they get enough training data, maybe they can figure it out, but they're going to need a lot of training, and I'm not sure how to do that well.
And the people that you interviewed, they were also of the same opinion? Like they also felt more comfortable?
Yes, the people that we interviewed were really heavily leaning on their friends already, and they felt that this was the right solution.
Okay, are there any remote questions? Okay, so then perhaps we should have Thea.
Farnaz is up next.
Farnaz, and then, yeah. Oh, okay, quickly, one more.
I'm going to introduce Farnaz briefly, and then we'll switch over to her. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I was wondering whether you use access to content or whether, in principle, this could be end-to-end and not require access by Squadbox.
The work is being done by the moderator, the friend moderator. The friend has to be able to see the email.
Right, but considering the friend as an end.
Right. So the point is, you could separate the friend from Squadbox. Like if the friend could receive the email encrypted, Squadbox doesn't actually need to see the email. But then instead of trusting Squadbox, you would have to trust whatever client the friend was using to decrypt the email, which we would probably also be providing. So I think it could be done. There are some things that we talked about doing with Squadbox where being able to look at the message is useful. So for example, we thought about redacting certain sensitive information like credit card numbers and things. And Squadbox needs to see the content in order to do that. We also actually do use the Google Perspective API to generate a toxicity score for each message as a sort of preliminary signal to the moderator. And again, that's something that we would need to actually see. But the core functionality could be achieved just fine end to end.
Thanks.
Sure.
Okay.
All right, so this was topic one, talking about really putting, again, not having the platforms moderate, but having your friends moderate for you. We're now going to move on to talking about dealing with misinformation in a similar way. Sorry, can you switch back to my slides for just a sec? This project actually got started because of an incident that happened to me several years ago, which is that I started getting vaccine misinformation in my Facebook feed. And it was coming from somebody who wasn't even a friend of mine. How did it get there? Well, what happened was that one of my doctor friends was a friend of this other person and saw them posting vaccine misinformation and commented in order to refute it. Now, what does Facebook think when they see somebody commenting on a post? Well, they think, ooh, this is a post that prompts conversations. There's engagement here. So we should boost its visibility to other people so that we get more revenue. Okay? So my friend's goal of reducing the spread of this misinformation was completely sabotaged by the response of the platform, because the platform didn't understand what my friend was trying to do and also didn't care. Now, what should have happened was that my friend wanted to send a signal that says this is misinformation, and I wanted to receive that signal and not see that post. But the platform couldn't tell and didn't care. So we thought about how to address this problem, which again is about empowering my friend who wants to send me information about, who wants to flag misinformation for me, and I who want to benefit from my friends flagging misinformation. So we talked about developing a system that lets people add accuracy assessments and notions of who they trust to the platform data model, then assess content and consume the assessments from people that they trust in order to block out content that is misinformation. And now we will switch to Farnaz presenting the details of that idea.